Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hi, Elise. Good. Can everyone hear me? Good. All right, yes. Thank you. Hello. Hello to those of you just coming in. I think we're just waiting on a few people. I know it's really nice outside today. Hopefully everyone got to, I don't know, even if you're just walking to class. I had one class today on campus. I'm only on campus Wednesdays and Thursdays, so I don't get out much, unfortunately. All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are in week 2, and today we're talking about a very hot topic, which is art in North Korea. So first thing though, I want to just give some general feedback on the blogs. Everyone did really excellently last week. Make sure you look at the feedback. I responded to everyone. And if there was an area that you needed to improve in order to keep getting 10 out of 10, I explained that area in the comments. And if you're still a little bit confused about my exact feedback, please contact me. So just general thing is, for everyone, make sure that your answer, your post responds to each question in the prompt. Usually there's multiple questions just in one prompt. So some of us were answering some of the questions, but not all of the questions. My suggestion is always just, make it really simple, make it really direct. So for example, I would describe Korea's 20th century history as ... right? So use the question in the response. The other thing is that comments are, I know, because I've been a student too, I know commenting on other people's discussion board posts is kind of a drag. But I do have to give you a grade for it. So my main advice is just make sure you're building a conversation, not just saying something. And I touched on this last week, but here's some examples that I kind of made up based on some things that people said. So a lot of people said something like, I agree that people outside of Korea see South Korea and North Korea almost oppositely today, right? Okay, good. But then you kind of need to explain why you're thinking that. So I feel like South Korea is seen as positive from things like its music and television shows, but North Korea always makes headlines for being threatening, right? So do you see how there's kind of a statement or a statement of agreement here, but then an explanation as to like why you agree with that? So make sure that you are, yeah, if you need to go in and out, just do whatever you need to do. Sorry. So does that kind of make sense with that one? And then similar one is I find it interesting that you would want to represent Kim Il-sung differently from his usual depiction by making him wear a miner's uniform. This is just an example. Some of you said you wanted to put him in more like a different outfit. And so ask a question. Do you think that people in North Korea would receive that representation well, or would it not make Kim Il-sung seem lesser than the dear leader he is supposed to be? So is this kind of making sense what you should be doing in the comments? Yay or nay? Okay.
Yeah.
Most of us are getting that. Thank you. Especially this week, I noticed most of us got that. All right. I'm gonna actually close this. Okay. So North Korean art. Let's start a discussion thinking about this video you watched of David Kong. So you've watched 2 videos by him now. He's one of the like main professors who actually does more making actual media about teaching about Korea. So that's kind of why we have 2 videos from him. So based on what you watched, what seem to be some stereotypes about North Korea? And then what is David Kong's kind of take on the problems with these stereotypes? What do you think? It could be anything. Anything he mentioned, anything that you've experienced personally or heard people say. There's a lot. Yes, it's an evil and awful place. Yes, absolutely. That is like the number one main thing. Anyone who says anything about North Korea, it's always prefaced, it's an evil and awful place. Yeah. Yes, and then that makes it seem like we make it seem like North Korean people are just caricatures as opposed to regular people, right? People outside tend to think they're all brainwashed, right? We don't view them like they're normal. Yes, and the government has very strict rules, absolutely, and a lot of power for sure. Yeah, North Korea is evil and its people are brainwashed. That is the stereotype. Yeah, people don't have phones, not even just phones, but just regular everyday technology that we think of in the 21st century. They don't have 21st century technology. But we're gonna find out that's not true. They do, right? Yeah, there's no civilization, right? Exactly. People are just slaves. There's nothing, nothing worth knowing about it, or nothing worth your time there. Absolutely. But yes, what he says is what we're going to be trying to do a lot today, is recognize that there are real people there who they just live their everyday life like we do, in spite of it, right? They do have these poor living conditions and they do have a lack of rights and freedoms, but for them, it's just every day, right? Good. Yeah, Korean soldiers don't smile. I think generally speaking, I don't know if soldiers are supposed to smile or not, no matter like if they're guarding something, but still, yeah. We see a lot of military, right? That's the stereotype about North Korea, is that military. Almost every picture of North Korea has the North Korean military involved in it, right? Good. So yeah, so North Korean people as all these things that we've said, and then the government as all these things that we've said too. But what's kind of weird, and you put it this way, what's kind of weird, and he talks about this, he mentions this too. What's kind of, there's something about these 2 stereotypes. Do they seem to go together, or is there something a little bit disjunct about them, right? So North Korean people are supposed to be, it's the sad, poor country that doesn't have anything. But then at the same time, North Korea is this insane threat, right? And it's super violent, and we should be afraid of it, right? So there's these 2 stereotypes that they don't really go together when you actually start putting them next to each other. And so as we said, right, so these are not my pictures, but maybe try Sarah. Oh, you can't even hear me. Never mind. Sorry, we have a student who's not able to connect to the audio. So in reality, people are just living their lives, right? We have these are people that the professor, Maya Stiller, she's the professor who made this class, and my advisor. She's been in North Korea. I've never been to North Korea. But it's just like every day here. People work, they go to their jobs. Some of them have nice things, other people do not, right? And so that's something very important to remember. Who should we be concerned with when we're talking about North Korea? Ourselves or the people who are actually there? right? So good question. Can US citizens travel to North Korea? And the answer is yes, they can. However, anyone who tries to travel to North Korea, it's a very hard process. There's a lot of applications and screenings and background checks involved in it. The people who are able to travel there the most easily are typically like ambassadors, people affiliated with the government. And the other thing is you have to be going there for a purpose. You have to have a very specific purpose to go there. So you have to be going there for, so like Professor Stiller, she went there, she went there for research. She did research on this, some Buddhist temples that are in this one in at Mount Kumgang, the Kumgang Mountains. And so she had this whole plan laid out, right? This whole itinerary. And so every day she was only supposed to do that thing that she had put out. And if you travel there, you have what are called minders. So people who are employed by the North Korean, the party, and they follow you around, they act as translators. They used to not let people who weren't, they didn't used to not let people who speak Korean in. But now, like Professor Stiller speaks Korean fluently, but now they do. And so it's a very hard. So people get pictures from North Korea a lot because it's opened up so much. There are still a lot of parts of North Korea that don't exactly have pictures. The other thing is satellites, right? So North Korea can't really prevent people from other countries from getting pictures of North Korea with their satellites. So, and then North Korea actually sends a lot of pictures of itself out, right? Which we'll talk about that in a little bit, about media control and trying to control the image of North Korea, right? So South Korean people are not technically allowed to go to North Korea unless they are defecting from South Korea to North Korea, which is a whole different process, and it's very rare. It did happen recently. One person, I want to say it was in like 2015 or something, one person did defect from South Korea to North Korea. But primarily people defect from North Korea to South Korea, as you can imagine. But South Korea is really, to my knowledge, the only actual people who are banned from just entering North Korea. Good questions. All right. So as we go along, we want to make sure that we distinguish between the government and the people. That's the main gist right here. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that so far. We all seem on the right path. I don't. Viola's question is, do I know what someone who defects from South Korea to North Korea, what it would look like? So everyone has their own reason for defecting from one or the other to the other. And generally speaking, I remember from what I've read, the person who went from South Korea to North Korea, it was because it tends to be like like what we would call like xenophobia, which we're going to talk about this next week, but like anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism, anti-Japanese sentiment. Because North Korea's ideology is which we'll talk about, is predicated on this anti-foreignness, right? So that's one reason. The other reason is because of debt in South Korea. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but if you've seen the movie Parasite, right, that whole film is about the debt crisis that a lot of individuals are undergoing in South Korea. And I think the one person I'm thinking of, I don't remember their name, but you can look it up. There's not many people, so it's pretty easy to find. That's another reason that person defected to North Korea, was they were just in so much debt. So like they needed to get out of it. And, that's what they thought to do.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Yeah, but people defect North Korea. Yeah, people who defect North Korea leave, you can imagine all the different reasons that people leave. They definitely, generally speaking, refugees from North Korea, and I wish we had more time to talk about refugees from North Korea. Generally speaking, they have a really hard time in North Korea, but they also have a really hard time once they leave as well, right? And once you defect, you're not allowed to come back in. You can't just come and go, right? You have to face all sorts of stigma. You don't have any skills, right? If you're defecting North Korea to use to get a job outside, whether it's in China or even if you make it to South Korea, because you have to defect through China, right? And so a lot of people just end up in the northern area of China and Manchuria on the other side of the border, right? And so like there's huge problems with human trafficking, sexual slavery, and especially for women defectors, right? So yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot to think about. All right. Are there any more like pressing questions people have about North Korea? I was going to reserve to do this at the end of class, but we can just do it at the beginning. That's also fine. Because students typically have a lot of questions. All right. So let's talk about living in North Korea a little bit more then. So one of the things that's interesting is that there is actually a class, a rich and upper class, right, in North Korea. And so despite so in North Korea, they're called the Tonju. And so ton means money, and ju is a Chinese character for like master or owner. They're all in Pyongyang, and they're families that have close connections or favor with the North Korean regime. So some analysts and scholars in North Korea call this development a grassroots capitalism, mostly because the regime does not officially condone these economic activities and because they did arise out of an economic meltdown that happened. So in the 1990s, North Korea underwent a terrible famine. And so from that, these kind of grassroots versions of a free market started to develop. So personally, this is just me personally, I don't really like the word grassroots for this because grassroots usually indicates the lower class, right? And these people are definitely not, they are not the lower class. So the Donju, they make money through international trade, much like other capitalists all over the world. And they are involved in a plethora of markets, including real estate, food, clothing, cars, and appliances, and all of which are these foreign brands or foreign made products. So what's interesting is that powers like the US and Europe, they go between supporting and denying the existence of this class in North Korea. And in particular, what you'll see people who support it, especially from the US perspective, is they see it as an opportunity for corporations in the US to enter into North Korea. And then this will eventually give the United States government more leeway with control over a North Korean market. And then on the other hand, though, there are the people who are suffering. So the people who live outside of Pyongyang, outside of the capital, they have these harsher socioeconomic conditions, and they also partake in what you could call like a quasi-free market system. It's called Jangmadang, and Jang means market, and Madang means yard. So they call them market yards. Madang can also mean garden. So like Tonju, these arise during the 1990s due to the famine. And it was actually people just trading their rations with each other. And they're still quite strong today, actually. And I definitely think these are more as like grassroots capitalism and definitely a sort of like positive black market, you could also call it. They are mostly based now on the illegal trade between the northern border with China. But what's interesting is that they are not based in currency as much as they are in this like traditional bartering system. So you trade your goods with each other. So they're also not just outside, they're also indoors. You'll see like big warehouses that they've renovated for these. And finally, as you can expect, the North Korean regime kind of fluctuate between like acknowledging that they exist and actually cracking down on them. So again, this is just my opinion, but I do think that the regime, especially nowadays, really needs these kinds of so-called like illegal markets so that regular people who do not actually believe in the regime will not care as much about the control that the regime has over things, right? So we don't really know where this is going to go. And Jangmadang particularly is a very new subject for people to study. And I think liberty in North Korea is an organization that is dedicated. They're actually based, I think they're based here in North America. They just came out with a documentary about the development of Jangmadang and people, and it's on YouTube, so you can look it up and watch it if you're interested to see the way these people are surviving. All right. So let's talk about the government, because this is the part that gets really complicated. So the first thing you need to understand is that North Korea is you could call it a dictatorship, but what's most important is that there's one party. There's only one political party, and it's called the Workers' Party of Korea. And the people who are the heads of Korea, the different people, they are like the leader of the party. So we have this guy here. Who can help us out here? Who was the first one? If you have them organized, there's gonna be 3 different people. They're all men, and one of them's the grandfather, one of them's the father, and one of them's the son. Does anyone remember who the first one was? Who's the oldest one? Kim Jong-il is after. Kim Jong-il is in the middle. Kim Il-sung. Yes, this is Kim Il-sung. So he was first, and then he's the father of this guy who is Kim Jong-il, right? So who's the dictator? Who's the person today? What's his name? Kim Jong-un. Yes, exactly. Good. Kim Jong-un. And does anyone know who the woman is? I would be very impressed if you knew who this was. She was really popular. She was in the news, maybe in like 2019, like 2020, on the cusp of COVID. So her name is Kim Yo-jong. And she is actually allegedly, and I do think it's true, she is Kim Jong-un's sister. And she has been acting like she's kind of been acting like a spokesperson for the government, particularly towards the outside, more so recently than Kim Jong-un even has. Kim Jong-un doesn't really make specific proclamations as much anymore, but Kim Yo-jong is kind of that person recently. So we're a little bit confused on like what her status is exactly. So how would you describe this system? What would you say? What are some words that come to mind when you see this kind of system? There's no right or wrong answer, and people debate it all the time. What do we think? Monarchy. Absolutely. Very monarchical, right? Father of, right? The father's son becomes the next leader, right? And dictatorship. Yes, absolutely. It's a lot like a dictatorship. Maybe not so much because of this system, but definitely because of the one party system, right? It's like a family business. Excuse me. Absolutely, Madison. Yeah, Maddie. It is very much like a family business. There are actually some people who would say that they are like, North Korea is itself just a business, and these are like they're like the presidents of the business, right? And so they get all the profit. Yeah, a combination between like dynasty and like a Stalinist, like Stalinism. Yeah, we're gonna get to Stalinism in just a moment. Yeah, dynasty, definitely. Good. Yeah, so you can use any of these. The other thing is patriarchy. We don't tend to think of patriarchy as like a governmental system so much as we do like a organization of society, but it's a very patriarchal so far, but we don't quite know what's going on with that. Yeah, definitely. So there's a mixture of these kind of like older systems and newer systems, right? Or more modern systems that we see. Good. So who picked up on, or who could tell what is the official economic or political ideology of North Korea? Lankov never explicitly states this, but he does talk about it a little bit in the reading. And I'm going to give you a hint. It is not socialism and it is not communism. It's something else. Does anyone remember? It starts with a J or it starts with a CH. It's also in Hong Ji-seok's article. Yes, 주체. 주체. What does 주체 stand for? Does anyone remember? So 주체 stands for self-reliance in English. That's kind of how they translate it. So although it may have some inspiration from other communist or socialist ideologies, it is its own thing and it is best understood as such. So you're not really gonna figure it out if you just think about communism and socialism. So however, while it is its own thing, it does not have a clear definition. So it makes it difficult for people outside of North Korea to understand. In 1990, Kim Jong-il referred to it as socialism of our style. But since then, the term socialism, doesn't really show up much. The Kim regime doesn't really use it very often to explain it. So in theory, Juche preaches a we can do it ourselves kind of motto. And it is centered around North Korea and the Kims, right? So it's both isolationist and nationalist. However, as you read in Lankov's text, the practice is quite different from what they preach. So North Korea has historically continually relied on aid, particularly from other countries like China, the US, and South Korea, to provide for people in North Korea. So the emphasis on Kim Il-sung especially can be compared to other socialist ideologies or socialist-based ideologies that developed in the 20th century, such as Stalinism and Maoism, which are very heavily centered on like the cult of the leader, which you started talking about earlier, right? And many people are also relating it as like an extreme form of Confucianism because it emphasizes this patriarchal lineage, right? But the main thing is that the center of it all is really Kim Il-sung, right? So the cult of personality is really what keeps this ideology moving. So let's talk about the cult. So what are some ways that it seems like the Kim family maintains this cult or maintains Juche? How do they do that? There's a lot of different ways. What were some of the ones from that Andrei Lenkov talked about? What do we think? Secrecy, isolation. Yes, kind of. What some of the more like tangible things? What are some, sorry, I should say what are the more tangible things? What are some of the ways that they preach the cult? They keep people thinking about the cult and Juche. Boom, there we go. Grandiose and false stories about country's origin. Yes. Myths. They have these myths about the Kim family, right? Exactly. What are some of those? Propaganda. Yeah, all of this can qualify as propaganda. We'll talk about propaganda in just a moment, a little bit more specifically. But yeah, so like the false stories. What else? The entire thing that you wrote your blog post about. What is all that? What was the word he used? Imagery. Yes, imagery. There's another word too, though. What was the word? It also starts with an I, actually. Representation, iconography. Yes, icon. Icon. What's very important is that there's icons. And then, good. So myths about the family. So one of the ways that the Kim regime maintains control is they form and keep this mythology, right? And it's particularly about Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. We don't quite have any myths about Kim Jong-un yet, but I'm sure we'll get some someday. So for example, Kim Il-sung is credited as the founder of the Korean Communist Party, but he was never actually involved in the Communist Party. The official Communist Party that existed during the early 20th century, if during the 1920s, he was never actually a part of it. He's also believed to have led the war against the Japanese Empire in Northern Korea / Manchuria during the early 1940s. But although he was a leader among the guerrillas, he was not necessarily like the single leader. or like the head of this movement. He was just one of them. Um, and then Kim Jong-il is mythicized as having been born at Mount Paektu. So that's the mountain that's at the border between North Korea and China. And so it's like traditionally or like mythically believed to be like the birthplace of the Korean people. And there's this whole national foundation myth that has to do with Mount Paektu. It's also in South Korea, this myth. But Kim Jong-il was not born there. He was actually born at a refugee camp in Russia. So he wasn't even born in Korea, technically. And then finally, and this is perhaps the most important myth that the regime keeps alive, is that North Korea is not dependent or inspired by any foreign cultures or powers, even though, as we've discussed, North Korea is definitely inspired by many foreign cultures and dependent on foreign aid constantly. So thinking about last week, why do you think it's so important for them historically to downplay foreign influence in North Korea? Why would that be so important? What did we talk about last week? Why would that be attractive to people in Korea? Well, they're traditional. That might not be why they really care about downplaying foreign influence, or like why someone who lives in Korea would be, oh, yes, okay. Yeah. Maintain the power of their people. Why is that important? Part of the myth is that they're true Koreans. Right, exactly. But why is that so important? What's the defining feature? Preserve their origins, right? But what did Korea undergo prior to the founding of North Korea and South Korea? What did they endure? What did Korea endure? They were under foreign control, right? The entire first half of the 20th century, they were under Japanese control. And then North Korea was for a few years under USSR, not necessarily control, but more or less a lot of USSR influence. And then the South Korea is still viewed as being under US influence and US control, right? So that's why it's so important for them to downplay this foreignness, because yeah, they want to be seen as the true Koreans, but it's because historically, in recent history, they were under foreign influence and under foreign control, right? Good. So media. So in North Korea, the party controls all media, from television to computers, and all news is carefully skewed to match the government's interests. So the most common subject in North Korean news is the Kims. Of course, people in North Korea, especially the Donju, do have computers, but they even have cell phones, but they do not have a legal connection to the internet. Instead, they have a North Korean intranet. So they have like a North Korean, just in North Korea, they have a net that they can connect to. And so the main thing that the media in North Korea tries to portray is that North Korea is a paradise, and everywhere else, especially the US and South Korea, are devastated, basically devastated hellholes. So if you remember, Lankop talked about how in North Korean news, they report that South Korean people are constantly trying to fight off US invaders, and that foreigners who come to North Korea think it is the most advanced place on earth. But everyone outside of North Korea, and a lot of people inside North Korea know that inside North Korea know that that is not true at all, right? Very much the opposite. And if you're interested in seeing the way that North Korea tries to portray itself in media, we in the US, you do have access to North Korea's official website, which is called DPRK Today. I don't condone any of the information on it. However, it is very interesting to look through and see like how North Korea wants itself to be portrayed. So you are able to get on that if you want to. And if you ever do research on North Korea, it's very helpful too to see how North Korea is imagining itself. Okay, icons. So what is an icon? So what are some of the different icons that we have here? And this is going to be very important for the class going forward, is talking about this idea of an icon. So you should have done, and all of you did do, the visual analysis module. So what was an icon in the visual analysis sense? And then what are some other ideas about icons that we have? What do we think? what do we, when I say icon, what do we hear? Good. Recognizable figure. Oh, I like that. Recognizable. You know, something or someone, you see it and you know what it is. Yeah, you can see it. Good. So yes, so think about what are icons in a religious sense? What are icons in a religious sense? Good. Symbol of import. Yes, I think that's a symbol. So a symbol is a very specific kind of icon. But definitely symbols are a part of it, right? So symbols are usually like an abstract thing, like you know, the use of the sun to represent like the leader of the country, right? So the sun isn't actually the leader of the country, but it's an abstract representation of the leader, right? Good. Someone who you look up to, absolutely. In popular culture, particularly, we use the icon like, oh, they're an icon. I love them. I want to be like them. An idol, yeah. So like in a religious sense, something that you use to help you perform worship or prayer or any kind of ritual, right? Good. And yes, there are lots of different icons in North Korea. Good. Powerful figure. Good. Yeah. So we have in visual analysis, representation of likeness, religious or ideological object of worship, popular, loved, and adored. And these are just some of the senses. And what would you say these icons in North Korea, what kind of sense are they? Would you say, what kind of sense are they? In the case of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, all these icons that they have of the Kims, all three, absolutely, yes, they are very much all of them, right? So it's important to think about that, right? So where are they? So we have here. So Viola helped us out here. She said, you know, we have statues, pins, and portraits in the homes, right? So we have in the homes. Where are the statues? So the portraits are in the homes. The statues are where? Cities and provinces, yeah. So the statues we could call like public. They're like public art, right? So the portraits are like private, and the statues and stuff are like public. So notice how there's no discrepancy between the two here, right? And so the icons are essentially everywhere. Everywhere you go in North Korea, there's probably going to be some kind of icon of the Kims somewhere. Good. And so we have all our examples here, right? So even think about like newspaper photos too. They function the same way. The fact that images of the Kims are always in the media, it's the exact same idea, right? You're trying to get the icon out there, get people to be thinking about him and talking about him, right? Good. So let's practice our visual analysis here, talking about the statues at Monsudae, right? So from the visual analysis, remember there's two parts to a visual analysis. There's what are the two parts? Who can help us out? And you really need to know this because you're going to have to do this over and over again in class and for your assignments. Yes, exactly. Even in the paintings, there's an icon and you have to have a quote. Yes, a quote's by icons. Yes, exactly. I was just reading, I'm working on North Korean monuments. Actually, I've read a North Korean book about monuments, and every page has a quote from either Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il. Yes. Good. So the two parts of visual analysis are description and interpretation. And Elise has a wonderful explanation of that. There's the meaning of the artwork, right? So interpretation, and then the way that it looks, the look of the artwork, right? That's description. So I always start with a description. I think it's easier to get small and then get big. So, or zoom in and zoom out. So let's start with describing these statues here, which a lot of you've already kind of started doing, right? When you're thinking about how you would make yours. So let's go with the medium. So medium is what it's made out of. So who can help us out here? What are, you could have a couple different answers for the medium for this. There's a couple different things you could say. Good. So bronze. So they're made out of bronze. Good. Do I have, what else? What are some other things you might be able to say about it? Maybe like the genre. Yeah. Copper sculpture. Here we go. Yes, copper. So it isn't copper. So one thing is that when it's like the actual material it's made out of, which is if you know what it is, you want to say the right thing. Bronze and copper. Bronze has copper in it, but they are a little bit different. So sculpture. Yeah, it's a sculpture. Some other things you could say. So the base, I think it's just concrete. Yeah. In your visual analyses for this class, you never have to be that specific, like what the base is. But yeah, like this white part down here that it's on, this like pedestal is just, I'm pretty sure it's just concrete, probably. Good. Good question. So icon. So who is this? This is, I know it's a really easy question, but it is important to clarify. So who are we looking at here? Who is supposed to be represented? Who do we think? And do we know who's on the left and who's on the right? Kim Il-sung, yeah, Kim Il-sung. And who else? Kim Il-sung is on the left, very good. Who's on the right? Who's on the right? Kim Jong-il. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if this is standard, but in North Korean art, generally speaking, Kim Il-sung usually is on the left and Kim Jong-il is usually on the right to each other when they're shown together. I don't know why that is, but you do see that often. Good. Yeah, how do they look? How do they look? So just kind of generally, it could be the order of importance, but I'm not really sure what the left to right kind of thing is. Yeah, good, happy, inviting, smiling. Yes, make sure. So part of describing is putting some adjectives with who they are, right? So they look happy. Why? Because they're smiling. They look inviting. What do you think? What makes it seem like they're inviting? What do you think? What makes it seem like they're inviting? The stance. What is it about their stance that makes them seem like that? Yeah, the posture. Yes, the hand is held out. Exactly. Good. Sorry, somebody's trying to call me. Yes, the hand. He has this hand raised out as if he's like gesturing. There's a couple different things. So what Ratham said here, looking to the future of the horizon. Absolutely. Hand gesture, it's kind of like very open, right? It creates this kind of like welcoming, like come in, come here, right? Good. Composition. So that's the composition is like the left and right thing. What other things might you say about like the composition of this, the way that the icons are placed, or the way that everything is placed in this? I think. I mean, Kim Il-sung on the left, Kim Jong-il on the right. Yes, there we go. Yes, the mountains in the background. Very good. There's mountains in the background. What was the mountains? What are those mountains? Does anyone remember? It's where Kim Jong-il was born. Yes, the Born Mountains. Yeah, Mount Paektu. Paektu. Paektu means white head is what it means. Pek is white and tu is head. Yeah. Yes, the size of them. Very good. The size is very important. Yes, exactly. And very good. Yeah, the size is very important. Good. The size, that kind of goes along perspective right here. And then they are facing outward, what Ratham says. That's also part of the composition. They're facing outward, right? Towards the viewer, the buildings to their back. So it gives them this very open feel, right? Very good. And style. So does it look, how are some of the ways you would describe like the colors, the line? Does it look real? Does it look abstract? Very realistic, very lifelike. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, exactly. Good. What did I say here? Yeah, I said shiny as well. Something you could talk about is like the texture. The clothing is very detailed. Yes, exactly. It's made to look real. So how is it made to look real? The clothing looks very detailed. You can see the lines and the way they really demarcated every little aspect of it, right? Like there's even pleats on his pants, right? That's very detailed, especially for a sculpture. Good. Okay, so are we kind of seeing some of the things you should be talking about when you write a description? Does that make sense? Yeah. And when you're writing all this out, you can put it, it's just your way of putting it into a paragraph, essentially. There's no right or wrong way to really put it all together. And you don't necessarily need to hit every single aspect of it either. Just make sure just make sure you're trying to hit all of these 5 points here, right? Okay. Are there any questions about the description? All right. Good. All right. So let's talk about do you focus on the backgrounds as well? So I'm going to be honest with you, you're not going to have to talk about this set of statues in any assignment going forward. It's just for like the blog and our class today. But generally speaking, it's up to you. So whatever you think is important, you probably should include in your description, right? So if I was doing it, I would talk about the background. But for example, if I was just talking about, like, I was just interested in the sculpture itself, I might not necessarily talk about the background. The reason I kind of overlooked it in our just now is because we're actually going to talk about a different mosaic mural. So I don't want to take up too much time discussing mosaic murals and stuff. Okay, so let's go to interpretation. So interpretation, I'm going to ask you, usually I ask you very specific questions about it. So one of the things that's important that we're all picking up on here is iconography. So who are they and how do you know? So how do we know that they're Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il? What are some ways we can know that? What do you think? What are some ways we can know that? Is it something we can pick up from the way they look, or is it just something we have to know? Yeah, so people are paying their respects. So that's a very good indication that they are the Kims. That's true. You can see that in the photo. You might not necessarily be able to see that in the sculpture itself. So we have these, yeah. So let's talk about the ways that Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il have to be presented. What are some of the ways that they have to kind of be conveyed or depicted, right? So we have these from our description: smiling, realistic, monumental, grand. Why? Why is that so important? What do you think? A lot of you talked about this. A lot of you actually said in your blogs, you thought that the Kim should be more stern looking. Why do you think that in North Korean art, the Kims don't really look very stern? They don't look stern. They don't look very dominating. They look more smiling, happy, welcoming, inviting, like we were saying. Why do you think? Why would that be important, particularly for like Juche and the cult? Okay. Yeah, good. So because they're so big, we know they're important. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yes, exactly. They're the specific leaders. So there needs to be an iconography to like make sure that we know who they are across the board, right? Yes, exactly. They're supposed to be friendly, right? If they're friendly and people are seeing them every day, right? Then you're probably going to be more likely to believe in them, right? You're probably going to be feel more invited to support them and to believe that they are these munificent, generous leaders, right? So, good. The future generation see them as good. Yes, exactly. And this is something that can be preserved and sent to people of all ages, right? Yeah, and it kind of maintains that. Exactly. So, right, the greatness of the Kim Juche. So another thing to think about in this case, not always, is the directionality. So some of us said this, I think, right? It's looking towards the horizon, right? So what's the importance of looking towards the horizon or reaching out towards the horizon? This future generations thing, right? They're leading North Korea into this great future. Exactly. Good. Okay. High hopes. Exactly. All right, so does interpretation make sense? Like this is just one example. Every interpretation, there'll be specific questions. You just have to answer them, right? But what's important is that we connect it to the description, right? So the fact that it's realistic looking, it's monumental, the fact that it's Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il and Mao Paek-do in the background, that helps us know that this is conveying the greatness of the Kims and Juche, the great future for North Korea, right? Does that make sense? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. I think most of us who are participating very actively in the chat seem to be getting it. There are some of us who seem to not be as active, but that's okay. All right. So where does this whole idea come from? Comes from this. Okay, no, sorry. So, oh, that's on my other page. Here we go. Okay, so socialist realism. Socialist realism is a genre of art. So it's a category of a kind of art, right? It's not bound to any medium. And the term was coined in the USSR, Soviet Union, during the 1930s as a means to explain how art should serve the socialist revolution, right? So art should serve the ideology of the state. So in practice, this means that there's lots of images of laborers working together, the government and the workers together, working together happily, everyone getting along and working toward this common goal of the revolution. So we can call socialist realism a type of propaganda, or we can at least call it like propagandistic, meaning that it is intended to make the viewer either believe something or do something. So this is very important that you understand. Propaganda is not just it promotes a political idea. Every kind of artwork promotes a political idea. Every kind of artwork. What's specific about propaganda is that it wants the viewer to believe that or do something in order to engage and promote that political idea. There's an action that's being called from this kind of artwork. Okay, so I don't want to see, you're going to be asked questions like, is this propaganda and why, or what is propaganda? And I really don't want to see, because it's political. Everything's political, but propaganda is specific. Good. So in the case of socialist realism, what does it want to do? It wants you to believe in the revolution or the state, and it wants you to commit yourself to the revolution in the state, right? So what we have to remember, though, is that it is a type of realism. So it's realistic, but it's not true necessarily, right? So it looks real, but that doesn't mean it's true. Calls for action. Absolutely. Yeah, propaganda calls for action. There is always some kind of action, whether it's explicit or implicit. There's always some kind of call for action in propaganda. That's not necessarily true for all art that's political, right? So, oh, here's my yeah, so it's idealized, right? Good. Okay, so does that make sense? So let's do this. We're gonna, yes. So why is it realistic but not true? What do we think? Why is it realistic but not true? That's kind of going to be the question about this artwork here we have. So let's think about that. Let's do our description here of this artwork. Okay. Oh, hold on. Let me move this. Describe. Okay. So what's the medium of this artwork? Do we remember this? What do we think? It is an oil. It's an oil painting. Yes, it's an oil painting. That's very easy, right? It's on canvas. That's also very easy to know. So who are some of the icons? Who are some of the people? What are some of the things? What are they doing in this artwork? What do you think? Workers. So it's not a war scene, but I like that you're thinking it looks like a war scene. I'm very interested in that idea. It is not a war scene. Does anyone know? So the title is Steel Workers. Yes, so they're not miners. So the title is Steel Workers. Always refer back to the title, right? The title usually helps us. Factory. Yes, Exactly. They're working to build their country, right? So these are steel workers who are working amidst the fire, right? And they are, right, the underlying thing is, we'll get to the underlying message. You're working hard to build the country, right? Good. Right. So let's talk about the composition. So what are some things, what I like about this is the background. So what's really close to us as viewers versus the foreground. So what's kind of the difference between between the foreground, sorry, the foreground is what's close to us as viewers, and the background, what's far from us, right? So in the foreground, what's going on versus what's going on in the background? What do we think here? Yeah, there's definitely a directional movement, right? What direction are they moving? That's also, there's a horizontal kind of movement. Yes, very good. The foreground, we can really tell what's going on, right? But the background is very chaotic, right? There's a lot of different stuff going on in the background, and we could sit around and pinpoint every little thing, right? Good. Good. How are they, so who's the subject? Who's the focus of this artwork? Yes, the workers are close. They're closer, so it makes us understand them. It makes us want to join them or see them. Right, exactly, in the foreground. And we can see their actions very easily. We know what they are doing very obviously, right? They are working. I mean, I don't know how steel working really works, but we know that they're working hard, right? Good. So the perspective, we have this kind of close-up perspective. Let's talk about the style. What about, how would you describe this style? Think about colors. This one especially, think about light and shadow, right? How does light and shadow work in this one? How do the colors work? Those are very important here. What do you think? Very dark, right? There's dark colors and then warm and hot in the foreground. Exactly. Very good. I love that. Warm and hot in the foreground. They use these very warm orange reds in the foreground, and it really evokes that sense of heat, right? And there's a lot of shadows, right? And it contrasts that furnace. It makes us know we don't see a furnace, but we can know because of this contrast that, oh my goodness, this is a really hot fire that they're working with, right? Good. And night colors, yeah, and it makes us think that that's nighttime. So that would make us think, oh my gosh, they're up late doing this as well, right? Good. So you don't need to know this word, but the word is chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro is when you have this strong contrast between light and dark or light and shadow. But that's what they're using here. And that's a European, that's like, it goes way back. We don't need to talk about it, but anyways, good. Okay, so let's talk about interpreting. So how is this socialist realism? Oops, sorry. How is this socialist realism? What do you think? Yeah, chiaroscuro later. So usually we think of it as like illusion painting, but later it just means this, it's this use of these, this heavy light and dark contrast, light and shadow. Good. So what do we think? How is this socialist realism? I think a lot of us are getting it here. Yes, exactly. Emphasis on the workers, real workers doing real work. They're celebrating it. Absolutely. They're showing these people working so hard, right? And it looks realistic, right? So style's realistic. The iconography, the icons are the workers. Let me see. Right. And so what this is conveying, right, is workers are the center to society, and they're working really hard. So then what's the message behind it? What does it want the viewer to do or to believe? What do you think? You work hard too. You work hard too. I think there's something even more. Yes, do your part for the country. Work for the greater good. It's worth sacrifice. Sacrifice yourself. Exactly. Good. Um, oh, that was my question. Work diligently, work hard for the revolution, right? If we all work together, we can do this, right? Good. All right. So artists in North Korea, we have about 15 minutes here. That should be enough time. So career of a North Korean artist. So as you can imagine, becoming an artist in North Korea follows a strict state-sanctioned process. Not just everyone can become an artist or anyone. So if you are an artist, you belong to and you make art for the state. It is not for your individual expression. So we tend to think of people, outside of North Korea people, we tend to think of artists as like these very self-expressive people, but that's not necessarily how it's supposed to be in North Korea. So first, you need to be accepted to the Pyongyang University of Fine Arts, and you can basically study whatever medium you want. But you do have to learn this kind of tradition of socialist realism, or you can learn crafts. They actually do have like crafts as well that they teach there. And then you'll be employed by a state-run art studio. So the one we're talking about a lot is the Mansudae Art Studio. And what's important is that, or what's interesting about North Korea is that you can earn, as an artist, you earn different levels of merit. So there's people's artists, and that just means that you're pretty good. And so you're allowed to like paint portraits of the leaders. But then the highest is called merit artist, and it means you have a lot more freedom to paint whatever it is that you want to, not just paint, but paint or create whatever kind of art you want, within the government's limits, right? And this is a system that's actually derived from the Soviet Union system from the earlier 20th century, which during the 1950s, the Soviet artists actually came over to North Korea and taught North Korean artists. So that's where it comes from. So this is the Mansudae Art Studio campus. And I always want to, I ask these questions. What do you notice about this campus? This is an art studio campus. Does anything about it surprise you? Very run down. Yeah, what else? It is very big. Yes, it is very big. I think there's one really, yeah, there it is. It's very plain. There's not really any art, right? When we think about like an arts school, a campus, like if you go to, I'm thinking about the one that I used to in Columbus, like there are public sculptures all over the place. There's always an art show going on, bunch of stuff. Yeah, the buildings are interesting. Yeah. There's no, it's not very colorful. All there is this Kim Il-sung portrait here, right? And then this is a studio gallery. What do you notice about this? This is something, even as a tourist, you probably can go in here as well. What do you notice? It's very clean. It is very full of stuff. It's very gray. What do you notice about the art? What kind of artwork? What kind of artworks are on display in this gallery? Landscape, floral art, wildlife, right? We have these like embroidered towels right here in the front, these embroideries. There's ceramics. There's, I guess these are probably also ceramic like animals, right? All this kind of stuff. Does that have anything to do with Juche or socialist realism or the Kims? Not really, right? This is just craft art. This is just stuff we would call kind of like art for art's sake. Like it just looks nice, right? Or it's just something. Some of these landscapes probably are of important national landscapes, but as far as like the crafts are concerned, not really anything too explicitly political or propagandistic about it, right? So the Matsudae Art Studio does a lot of these projects, and the Matsudae Hill statues are one of the projects that they did in the mosaic mural. But they also do like these public paintings, the posters. There's a lot of posters in North Korea. They make those, and then there's a lot of other like public mosaic murals as well that they make. So let's talk about this one. So the text says this is a hand painted poster. The text says, "We cannot allow the use of nuclear weapons by the US imperialists." So let's just describe it really quick. What are some things you might say about this if you were asked, if I asked you to describe it? Just really quickly. US as in United States. United States. So we cannot allow the use of nuclear weapons by the United States imperialists. Looks like a child's hand. Very important. It looks like a child's hand. Exactly. What else? There's a lot of stuff going on. It could just be anything. We're not going to like go through it one-on-one. Straightforward. I mean, I think the colors on the arm, they're very bright. I think they're supposed to evoke like the sleeves of like a child's shirt. That's just my interpretation of it. That's just what I see it as. Yeah. Very straightforward, good. What else? What is this big thing here in the back? Reaching for the north. Okay. What is this black shadow kind of in the background? What do you think that is? A nuke. Yes, it's the weapon, right? Yes, invokes fear. Yes, it invokes fear, right? And then what's going on in the background here? What's the background of? Who's on the left? Who's on the right? Korea's in red. Yes, exactly. Good. Yeah, so we have the US over here and Korea over here. And yeah, it literally makes it look like the US is going to drop a nuke on Korea. So is this socialist realism? Do we think this is socialist realism? No. Why not? Why is this not socialist realism? So it doesn't depict the workers, right? So, and it's also not really realistic. It's not really realism. More like, I had a student who called it like graphic. It is a painting, but it is very much like graphic art in a lot of ways, right? So, it really doesn't count as socialist realism, but does it count as propaganda? And why? What do you think? Propaganda? So it's a poster. Poster is very important medium for propaganda, right? What does it want the viewer to either do or believe? It's against the US. Yes, it tells North Koreans, it wants you to believe that the US is going to nuke you, right? And Korea, and it even wants you, if you ask me, it wants you to join in trying to stop them, right? You need to join in North Korea and you need to try and stop them from doing that, right? Yeah, you need to help us defend. Good. So let's talk about nuclear weapons really quickly here. So as we're seeing, even right now, earlier this week, one of the main issues in North Korea, the North Korea and outside relationship is that it's continuously threatening other countries with nuclear weapons. So just last week, there were articles about 800,000 people in North Korea being being willing to fight the US. And then if you're following along, on Monday, North Korea test fired yet again some ballistic missiles. So these stories are all over North American news outlets and are the major contributor to the stereotype of North Korea as like this warmongering, violent country, which it's not necessarily incorrect, but there is a bit of a nuance to it, right? So Lankov called this the nuclear blackmail campaign. And it's essentially how North Korea uses nuclear weapons to threaten and heighten tensions so that the US and other powers will call for negotiations. And then North Korea can wring some kind of aid out of the nations. So like on Monday, I was reading that North Korea is test firing missiles now, likely not because they're threatening the US necessarily, but the US military is bringing in new aircraft carriers into South Korea. So as you can imagine, North Korea is probably not just interested in starting a war, but just trying to show off to the US and South Korea as they're expanding militarily that they're ready for any military expansion, right? So, however, it is true we do not really know what North Korea's end game plan is. But instead of freaking out, this is just my soapbox here. Instead of like freaking out every time that you hear North Korea is doing something, which is all the time, like they're always doing something related to the military, just be sure to read up on the details. Don't just follow a headline. Um, Also, I really suggest following like British news sources and Canadian news sources as well on North Korea, because they tend to be less biased and less sensationalist as well. So that's my soapbox on the nuclear weapons thing. Let's talk about really quickly. I think we have enough time right here. So everyday art in North Korea. So like we said, art is everywhere. One of the really impressive things about in North Korea are these mosaic murals. And in the subway, they have tons of them. So what is a mosaic mural? Does anyone work in mosaics or ceramics? Not glass, but similar. They are actually ceramic tiles. So they're little tiles that are made out of clay. And you can see how there's little lines here for every single tile, and they're glazed. So glaze does have the glass component in it. They're glazed and fired, and then they assemble them to create this kind of artwork, right? So this is even better picture. So you can see how they've taken these little mosaic tiles and put them one on one on one on one like that, right? So let's talk about this. So who is kind of the subject? What is going on in this mosaic mural here? And then we'll talk about what is going on here, just really briefly. Yes, good. Leader with the workers. Yeah, this is Kim Il-sung in the middle here, and all the workers are around him. Good. I like this word, cooperation. They're all together working together. And good. They're different occupations, and they're coming towards the viewer, right? So it's like a way to the future. The age of industry. Good. Yeah, yeah. And it highlights where are you getting industry from, Ratham? What in this artwork shows you industry? There's something really particular. The background. Absolutely. Good. Yes. Great, Madison. Yeah, the workers are smiling. They're all happy to be around Kim Il-sung, right? They're all happy that they're working and they're very hard, and Kim Il-sung is leading them, right? Exactly. So, is this socialist realism? What do you think? Is this socialist realism? Yes. Yes. So, I think it is a very particular type of realism, though, and this is what I'm going to introduce to you, which is juche realism. I think this counts more as juche realism than it does just socialist realism. Why? What about this is juche specifically? What do you think? And you'll see this term juche realism used often. Why might this be juche realism more than just socialist realism? Kim Il-sung, yes, Kim Il-sung, very much so. In socialist realism, and you do see the depictions of the leader, but what we see here is especially the cult of the leader. Especially in North Korea, people tend to start referring to it more as juche realism, because it's not just about promoting the socialist revolution, but it's about promoting juche and self-reliance and believing in the Kims, right? Yes, interesting that this is actually a minor. I believe this is a minor, not a soldier. We could go through and identify who each of these people are. There's like a list of occupations. In North Korea, there is like a hierarchy of like occupations, like the most revolutionary occupation and downward, right? And the miner is like in the top. That's like one of the most revolutionary jobs you could do. Good. Yeah, so the iconography of the Kims and the workers together. Good. So, right. Okay. So let's talk about your plenary response. So what you're going to do for this is you're going to respond to this prompt, and this prompt is also on Canvas, and submit it. You're going to submit it on Canvas in the week 2 module as either a Word document or a PDF. And you need to submit it by Friday at 11:59 p.m. So your response should be about 250 words. So let me read the prompt to you. What you're going to do is you're going to choose one of the following 2 artworks that we discussed in class. So we cannot allow the use of nuclear weapons by the United States imperialists. So the poster, or great leader, I should say dear leader, Kim Il-sung among workers, or the mosaic mural. So notice we didn't really dive too deep into those, but you're going to describe and interpret the artwork. So you're going to conduct a visual analysis. You're going to write a visual analysis of it. In your interpretation, answering the following questions. Does this artwork qualify as propaganda? Why or why not? What is its message, and how does it succeed or fail in communicating that message? You need to include at least one citation to either Lankov or Hong's reading. And then the image files of the artworks for your readership, or for you to view, they're also on Canvas under the plenary response submission. Okay. So when you're doing the citation, remember it needs to be the last name of the author, comma, the page number. Okay. I don't want to see titles. And that's usually what I don't want to see, the chapter name or anything like that. Okay. So here's the syllabus here really quickly. So you're going to get 4 points just for properly writing an answer to the prompt and answering the questions in the prompt. You get 3 points for having a citation and using the proper format. And then you get the writing, and then you get 3 points just because I see an effort from you. All right. So does that make sense? It is 7:15 now, so you are welcome to go if you need to. If you have questions, you can stay back. So thank you all very much. You can use both. You just need to have at least one citation. And it needs to be a reading from class. Sometimes I have students who get really confused and they try to use other things. Really, it should be something that we've read in class. It's just so that I know what those are about. I know what they say. So it's familiar to me. It should just be the citation format is just in parentheses, the author last name, comma, and then the page number. So sometimes it can be a video from class, but this week, no. This week, no, it really needs to just be from either Lankov or Hong, the 2 readings. It needs to be from one of the readings. Mostly because there's really no way that you would use David Kong's video in answering this question, because his is all about stereotypes and about North Korea and whatnot and what it's like in North Korea. So there's really it really doesn't relate to this prompt. Yes, thank you as well. Let me see. Elise, did you have a question?
I did. This doesn't really have anything to do with the response, but it was just a question I was really curious about.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about trading and how North Koreans trade with the US. I was just wondering how rare it would be to find a product that says made in North Korea in America, because I don't think I've ever seen one before.
So
Or would it just be from Korea?
So there